strategy says, how do we achieve our objectives? And one of the biggest problems is we're focusing on the wrong thing. We tend to focus on saying, let's be focused on today, what the customers are. And disruption is all about the future. So what I found is the only way to orient a company to make these tough choices today, to take on these obstacles, to make the investments in unprofitable businesses, is to have a really clear focus of who your future customer is. That is the center of your strategy.
Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey, talent growers, welcome back to another episode of the TalentGrow Show. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow, which is the company I started in 2006 to help develop leaders people actually want to follow. And it is the company that sponsors this show, so you can enjoy it every single Tuesday for free to help you grow your leadership skills. And before I introduce you to this week's guest, I just wanted to share with you a really fantastic recent new Apple Podcasts review that I received from a listener. The listener was Sel McCurdy, and the title is A Dose of Effective Professional and Personal Development. And Sel says, listening to Halelly's tips and her interviews with distinguished guests has encouraged me to be more self-aware and has motivated me to be a lifelong learner. As a result, I feel that I am growing professionally and personally. I look forward to this podcast every week. I love it. Thank you so much, Sel. I appreciate that you took the time to leave that really kind review. And you talent growers, if you listen to this podcast and get value and care to leave a short review like that, I could read it on a future episode of the TalentGrow Show. And I really appreciate every single review. And I think it really helps other people discover the show and give it a try. So this week, I have a best-selling author and a founder and a disruptor, Charlene Li. And she is going to share with us some of the information that's in her latest book, The Disruption Mindset, about how to think like a disruptor, how to be a disruptive leader, how to create the kind of structures and processes in your organization, even in your team, I guess, if you're not leading the entire organization, that can help create the kind of disruptive change that will help your company stay relevant and your current and future customers continue to benefit from everything that you do. I hope that you will find it inspiring. It's the kind of thing where in leadership, there's specific things you have to do for the day-to-day and with your team, but you also have to keep your eye on the horizon and be thinking in terms of the future. And as a leader, you need to be visionary. And Charlene talks about creating movements. So I think that you'll like it. I hope that you do. Let me know what you thought about it afterwards. Without further ado, let's listen in to my conversation with Charlene Li. Welcome back, talent growers. This week, Charlene Li is here with me. She's the author of 5 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Open Leadership, and the co-author of the critically acclaimed book, Groundswell. Her next book, The Disruption Mindset, is going to be published this August, and she's currently a principal analyst at Altimeter and was previously the founder and CEO of Altimeter Group prior to its joining Profit. She was named by Fast Company as one of the most creative people in business and is a frequent speaker and advisor to Fortune 500 companies. She is a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Business School and lives in San Francisco. A fellow Californian. Welcome, Charlene.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really glad you've stopped by. Your topic is interesting and a little bit different from what we typically talk about. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with the talent growers. Before we do, I'd love for you to describe your professional journey. Where did you start and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, I started consulting before business school, and then after business school, I went to newspapers, which is not what people typically do.
Right.
But I came to Silicon Valley in 1993 because there was this thing called the internet that was blowing up, and I wanted to be part of that. So it was kind of a disruptor right from the very beginning. And I thought newspapers were definitely going to be impacted. So that's why I planted myself there at the San Jose Mercury News. From there, I became an analyst at Forrester for 10 years and then started my own company back in 2008. right before the recession hit. And we fortunately were covering a really interesting space with technology and social media. So everybody wanted to know, how do you use this new technology to grow your company? So hit the sweet spot at the right time, grew like crazy through the recession, which is just insane. And then was acquired 4 years ago by Profit. I'm still there, keep writing research and books, and keep working in research. I really enjoy working with people about this stuff.
How awesome. And how many employees did you have when you were acquired?
We were about 20 people. And now we're just much smaller because times and things evolve, and we have a much larger infrastructure. Profit, which is a company that acquired us, is a mid-sized consulting firm, global, about 500 people globally. So good enough scale to be able to do some really interesting work. So we keep busy.
Well, that is definitely a disruptor's journey. And your latest book is called The Disruption Mindset that, like I said, is coming out in a couple of months. And I'm looking forward to your release, and congratulations. You say that you want to launch a movement of disruptors, a virtual army of change makers in all aspects of life and business. I kind of love that. Most people don't like to change, as you mentioned in your book or in what I've read about your book, but you say that disruptors are wired to walk on the knife's edge because it makes them stretch and grow. And I totally agree that the people who kind of move things are the ones that make the biggest impact, are people that are willing to go outside their comfort zone. And those are the ones that lead organizations that are capable of executing a disruption strategy that balances short-term execution to achieve today's goals against planning and investing for the future. I'd love for you to talk to us more about the distinction between the true disruptors versus everyone else.
Yeah, I think true disruptors understand that in order to reach this new place of growth, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a tough journey. Frankly, it's going to be painful, but that's how you grow. And if people say, like, I want to be innovative, but I don't want it to be uncomfortable. I want it to be a known, clear process. They're not going to get there, because the minute they come against a hurdle or an obstacle, they're like, well, that's too hard. I'm not going to do that. What I find with people in organizations, they oftentimes know what they need to do in order to move past a particular area, or they see a disruption coming. But they look at the organization and say, it's a huge battleship. I could never turn it. So they don't even try. Disruptors go, yeah, I see the obstacles, but I'm still going to go right towards it because that change needs to happen. So these are change makers, people who really believe in the opportunity for the growth. They're naturally optimistic about things, and yet they have this incredible capability of leading people through that change. So it's an interesting mix, these disruptors, a combination of that change mindset and yet the leadership behaviors to be able to lead people to make that change come to life.
You're describing, I guess, characteristics. Do you see them as traits that you either have or don't, or are these things that you can adopt and learn and anyone can do it?
Well, I think you're naturally inclined, and so they are characteristics, but they're also behaviors. And so I think it was mindsets and behaviors. I did a survey of 1,000 leaders globally, the US, UK, Germany, Brazil, and China. And what I found is that the people who are most disruptive, in other words, capable of driving exponential change, are the ones who have two characteristics. First of all, they have an openness to change. They just have a mindset towards that. They think change is a good thing, not a negative thing. So they run towards it. Sort of a growth mindset, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And the other part is they have those leadership capabilities, those behaviors where it's not about them, it's about everyone else. It's about developing a relationship with their followers and really empowering and inspiring them to achieve these goals. So it's an interesting combination of these two things. Like, to your question, can you change that? Yes, you can. First of all, you can start to slowly change your mindset, even if it's one that's more pessimistic and you gravitate towards constantness. But by partnering in particular with more and more people who have that openness mindset, that kind of drag you and open your mind towards these new opportunities, right? And then the other part of it, learning these behaviors, that is, as we know, leaders are not born, they're created.
Amen.
So working with strong leaders in this space who are capable of driving through other people, inspiring them, I mean, that's hard work. And it's really hard to see yourself as a leader creating movement. So I think basically these two things are possible. That said, these archetypes, I have 4 different archetypes of leaders in a disruptive world. Somebody who's strong in both of these, I call them realist optimists. They're like the cream of the crop of disruptors, right? They're capable of doing both, being open and leading people. And then we have worried skeptics who are not open to change necessarily. But they are the problem solvers. They're the ones who can look around the corner and see all the things that can go wrong and prepare the organization for that. Partnering a worried skeptic with a realist optimist is a really powerful combination. They kind of need each other to make disruption happen across the organization. Because if a realist optimist can convince a worried skeptic that this is the way to go forward, nothing can stop them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can't remember where I heard or read this, that sort of a fault of many visionary leaders is that they're too optimistic and they just completely miss or ignore risks and dangers. So that skeptic probably is the one who sees that, and can maybe they each complement or tame each other, and together they create that holistic picture.
Yes. And I think to build on that, there's one profile called the agent provocateur. This is a person who talks a great game, but when it comes down to actually the nitty gritty details of how to get it done, really does not tend to work in that direction. And right now we have a lot of disruptors who wave a lot of their arms up in the air and going, disruption is coming, disrupt or die. And then they walk off the stage to thunderous applause. And everyone's like, that sounds great. How do we do it? And yet you have to have that grit, that detail, that structure, the process. The most interesting thing that came out of my research is that the most disruptive companies actually have a tremendous amount of order, of structure and process. They are really buttoned down and get things done. Because we as humans can only tolerate so much change.
Yeah.
And if you're going to create a lot of change, a lot of growth, then the way that you do that, the determination of how you work together has to be constant. So the process will be the same, but what you're achieving with that process is so huge and audacious. You can focus on that big change because you don't have to focus on how you get it done. Disruptive organizations, people think disruptors are disorganized and chaotic. It's just the opposite. They're so buttoned down and ordered.
That is so interesting to me. I mean, it really does sound like a paradox, what you're describing. I'm struggling a little bit to think of how that would work in practice, in the sense that if you have structure and order and processes, yet you're changing a lot, then doesn't that throw everything out the window? And wouldn't none of those things apply for very long?
Well, think about what you're changing. You're really changing your business and you're changing how you're going to work. But if you have a process for creating that change, then it becomes a lot easier. So process is how you share information and how you make decisions. The governance, the process, you pull those into the organization. And when you know how you're going to change, how you're going to meet with each other and make decisions, then the change becomes a lot easier. What's really hard is when you don't know. So I'll give you an example. One company I studied is Huawei, who are in the news a lot these days because the U.S. is saying that they have spyware built into their technology. Let's put that aside and actually look at how they actually innovate, because they're a highly innovative company. They have 40% of their people involved in some form of R&D. That's a lot of people to coordinate.
That's research and development.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Research and development. And so somebody in Uzbekistan can create something that's new for a client there. They put it into their database, into their innovation and research and development database. And then somebody in Brazil can see that the next day and implement it for their clients. So that change is happening, but it's happening at a global level across 170 different countries. And they have, I think, 13 different research centers, innovation centers, and they're all structured the same way. The process is exactly the same way. So when a scientist moves from one location to another, they don't miss a beat. It's as if they're walking into the same lab, same process. Everything is the same. So that they can focus on the work and not how people do things differently in each of those centers.
Okay.
That takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I mean, people talk about Huawei, they kind of joke, everything has a process. In fact, if they start something and they don't know what the process is, they call the process engineers in and say, tell us how to do this so we don't have to figure it out, so we can focus on the work.
Cool. Okay. That helps. Thank you. And actually, we just recently had an episode with Liam Martin. He was talking about how creating processes and structures is one of the ways to help you become more efficient. So that is a great compliment. So you say that disruption has 3 different components. I think we've probably started talking about it already: strategy, leadership, and culture. And I'd love for you to give us a high level. Obviously, in your book, this is where our listeners are going to be able to get a lot more about that, but give us a high level version of what does each of these mean and why most of our listeners, the talent growers who are not maybe necessarily at the top of their organization calling all the shots, why they should pay attention to this.
Sure. Yeah. I focus very much on this mindset that has to change around these 3 areas. So strategy says, how do we achieve our objectives? And one of the biggest problems is we're focusing on the wrong thing. We tend to focus on saying, let's be focused on today, what the customers are, and disruption is all about the future. So what I found is the only way to orient a company to make these tough choices today, to take on these obstacles, make the investments in unprofitable businesses, is to have a really clear focus of who your future customer is. That is the center of your strategy. It's not to say the customers today don't matter, but your future customers are where you need to be oriented so you can take on that tough, painful work today. And again, I realize that not everybody in your audience is focused on the customer in their daily job, but I think everybody in an organization needs to be aware of who that customer is. Because even if you're in finance or HR, where you don't see them, you're still oriented towards them. So
of course, because the organization's work is all about, it wouldn't exist.
Exactly.
Customer.
Yeah. And so I have a colleague who says, if you're not focused on the customer experience, then you're working on the wrong thing.
I like that.
So you have to always understand that. And the further out into the future you can look, the more disruptive you will be. Because if you're only looking up to the next quarter, guess what? You're only going to orient your work towards the next quarter. If you're thinking about what your customers are going to look like for 5 years, then the investments you work on today will have their impact 5 years from now. And that's the key difference, I think, between disruptive organizations and ones that are not. They're making the investment today in that future customer. So that's strategy. And then leadership is simply this. You've got to create a movement because it's so difficult to go through this process that you need to create a movement that will sustain everybody in the organization through all those tough times. Because you as a leader can't be there all the time. And especially, I think, for the people who are listening to this podcast, because you're not at the very top, how do you create a movement? You create a movement based on where you are and on the objectives that you have to create. I love Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we taking on this tough work? It's because we're trying to build this future for our customers. And when people understand that and you repeat it to them all the time, not just every once in a while, but all the time, then you have a fighting chance of actually achieving that. Because otherwise people will just focus on the work that's in front of them. Mm-hmm. And the third area is culture. We talk a little bit about that. There are 2 types of cultures, ones that are stuck and ones that can live and thrive in what I call flux. They tend to actually do better. They get stronger the more that they go through these changes and obstacles. They lean towards it. And there are 3 beliefs of these flux cultures. They're open. They believe in openness and transparency. Again, what I talked about, the information, the decision making flows, being much more open and transparent to everybody in the organization, because that creates trust. There's a belief in agency, that each person is imbued with the ability to control their destiny and their outcome. And that creates a strong sense of ownership. And the third one is a bias for action. Organizations that thrive in flux can't stand still. They go, let's do option A or option B. I don't know which one it is. Let's try option A. If it doesn't work, then we'll try option B or maybe develop option C. But they're not going to stand still. So those 3 beliefs create this great culture and you embed it in your structure, your process, and very importantly in what I call lore, the stories, the rituals, the symbols that help hold that culture in place. So that's strategy, leadership, and culture in a quick nutshell about how that changes and disruption.
Yeah, and I know it's as a fellow author, I know it's so hard. When you have a robust message to condense it. There's so much more I'm sure that you would want to say about each of those. So thank you for giving us such a broad, high-level overview. I know that you have so many different examples from your interviews and from your research. I'd love for you to kind of breathe life into a couple, one maybe or two leaders that you've seen that you can tell us a story of who really are disruptors. I mean, I'd love for us to envision what a disruptive leader is like.
Yeah, this is one woman, Mala Sharma, who is the product manager for Creative Suite at Adobe. And Adobe went through this huge transformation about 5 years ago where they went from product software to software in the cloud. Huge transition. And she was the person tasked with carrying this on. And so, Adobe, when they began this in 2010, 2011, she was responsible for basically, in the end, about $2 billion of business out of $3 billion. So at one point she said, I felt like the weight of the company was on my shoulders.
Wow.
And it really was in some ways. And so, and she's a product manager that got tasked with this job, like, oh, we have a new idea. We think we should do this. The interesting thing for Mala was that nobody wanted this. The customers definitely didn't want it. The employees knew that everything would change, so they didn't want it. And very importantly, Wall Street they were facing this story they had to tell Wall Street that their revenues and income were going to go down for 2 years before they would see a turnaround.
Whoa,
because it would take that long for the revenues, because they used to be able to recognize the revenues up front. Now they're going to have to recognize that same value over 2 years. So it would take 24 months for this to work through. So she had to make sure not only was the product working, the communities were working outside of that, and the employees were turned around. She also had to work with the CFO and the investment relations team to make sure that that was happening too. And she's a product manager, right? So she really had to dig deep, figure out how to do this, and just systematically just went through all of this and was dodging and turning huge change. And just to give you an idea, they were so ready for this. People say all the time, we can't do this because our investors would never take it. They would never accept us making this change. And yet that's what Adobe did. They went to Wall Street and said, we're going to make this change. This is going to be really good for our future customers, and this is why. Which is great. The bad news is it's going to take us 24 months.
Yeah.
So every quarter they would come back and say, hey, this is great news. We are right on track. Our revenues are down. Our income is down. Isn't that great? And their stock price would go up every quarter. And it just always went up. It never went down. And it was interesting because it was what they were doing. They were setting expectations. And Mala was the person who had to go back and hit that every single quarter. So this is not somebody who just thinks up the great ideas, but can also execute over years of making this happen. So I love the example of how, this is an entire organization that did all of this. But I think in many ways, Mala is somebody who exemplifies what that leader looks like, because it wasn't just her. She was in many ways a person who was leading a very crucial part of it, but she built this huge coalition across the organization to make this happen.
Great. And that's how she was able to do it. She didn't have to go it alone. It's partnering up with others and convincing them and getting them into that movement, as you said.
Yes, exactly.
Love it. Well, I would really be interested in hearing a lot more about this, but as you know, I have created a 30-minute podcast, so time is running out, and I want to make sure that we always leave our talent growers with one specific action. But before we do that, what's new and exciting on your horizon? I mean, I imagine you're in book marketing world now.
I am in book marketing. I'll share with you one idea that's kind of a crazy idea. I want to create lots of different ways for people to understand the book. So you can read it, you can listen to it, you can read it on your Kindle and other tablets. But I also want to create videos, and I want to create a Snapchat version of the book.
Oh.
So what does that look like, right? I don't know. Um, so, but it's one of those ways I'm thinking about how do people actually learn new ideas? Where do ideas come from? How do they absorb them? And I realize that people learn in many different ways. So sometimes it's video, sometimes it's experiential. And I figure just with something fun, I like playing with all these new technologies to say, how do we tell stories in different ways? So I know we kind of poo-poo Snapchat as this kind of young person's tool, but I feel like young people, I want to reach them too as well. So how do I use Snapchat in an interesting, engaging way to get the ideas across? I shouldn't have to make them come to me. I should go to them.
I like it. So you're disrupting your own book launch.
Yeah.
Well, they're young people, they are the future. They are the leaders that are coming into organizations. They are the leaders that are going to be the ones serving those 5 years from now customers. I mean,
yeah.
Right.
And I think yes, exactly. And that's one of the reasons I'm starting a network of these disruptors, actual networks, because I think being a disruptor is a very lonely task. So the idea is to connect these disruptors to each other so that they can meet online, have discussions, maybe even form small circles to support each other over the course of a year in their disruptive activities, or maybe in person, they connect with each other and create this collegiality between disruptors, because I think there's a need for us to create this change, not only in our organizations, but also in our communities and in society.
Yes.
There are so many problems out there in the world. We need more effective disruptors who can create that exponential change. I think that people, especially young people, see the opportunity for that, but they don't have the skills and the knowledge. They don't have that leadership practice of how do I actually create this change that I think needs to be done.
Yeah, and they may not have the right mentors around them or people who can, encourage them rather than discourage them, so they can find that in your network that you're creating.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, I love it. I would really like to learn more about that as it's coming out. So what's one specific action that our listeners can take today, tomorrow, this week that can help them upgrade their own disruptive leadership skills, or whichever angle you would like to take on this?
So the one thing I encourage your listeners to do, the one thing and the only thing that really matters, is to focus on your future customers. Ask yourself this one question: who are your future customers? What do they look like? What do they feel? What do they think? What do they say? What do they do? And really work on trying to identify who that person is and stand in their shoes. Because until you do that, you can't answer the next question, which is, what kind of experience do they want to have with us? What kind of relationship? And then the third question is, well, what do I need to do today to build that experience for them? It all starts with a really clear definition that you and your organization, your team, have of who that customer is. So spend some quality time trying to figure it out. And even if it's just an inkling of an idea, pursue it. Go and find those customers, because they're there today, I bet. But you just need to be able to find them, listen to them, and develop that vision of who they're going to be.
I know that you probably need a lot more time to help us really walk through this, but is there some kind of a quick exercise or a question that you use to help people figure that out? Because I think that it's easy to say who's your future customer, but how the heck do you know?
This is one idea I have in the book that's really powerful. It comes from IBM and design thinking. It's to create an empathy map. So pick an idea of a person that you have, but don't define them by just a role. Think about the problems they have, but think about these things. Describe how they feel, how they think, what they say, and what they do. And that gives a deeper picture of who they are then, more than just, again, a title, role, or industry. Mm-hmm. But you're getting to know who they are as a person. You're trying to understand that whole person. Because when you understand how they're thinking about a particular situation that they're facing, then you can have a better sense of being able to stand in their shoes. And I think the other key piece of advice I would have is bring customers in and create a customer advisory board. Mm. And don't put your best customers, the biggest customers on there. Put the most demanding customers on that customer advisory board. And it's so important, especially with people who do not see the customer every day, that you hear from customers, so you understand who they are, today, but also how those emerging needs are coming up. And so think about creating a huge organism that just listens and senses emerging customer needs. Because you need everybody in the organization to be able to understand and see, oh, wait, there's this new thing that's happening here. And instead of thinking of that person, that customer, as an oddball, like we don't serve them, be curious about it. But what's driving that question? What's driving that need? Because that may be an indication of a future emerging need that we should take a closer look at.
Nice. Great. Well, Charlene, it's been really a pleasure speaking with you today. And I enjoy that you have challenged us to think more broadly and more long-term and inspired us to create a movement. I know people are going to want to learn more from you and about you. What are the best places to find you online?
You can find me at my website, charleneli.com, CharleneLi.com. And pretty much all my social media is under that name also too as well. So you can find me wherever you look for my name.
Awesome. And probably it sounds like maybe on Snapchat.
Yes, it does.
Which I've not tried yet. So, Okay. Well, great. And I'll, of course, link to your books, Amazon page. And I hope that we can hear more from you as that all develops and the network grows. So thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
All right, talent growers, I appreciate that you've listened so far, and I hope that you got lots of value. I'd love to hear what's your biggest takeaway from this episode, and what would you like me to cover in future episodes. I hope that you take action, of course. As always, I tell you that great new ideas and learning is good, and inspiration is great, but action makes change. And I know that in this episode, Charlene was talking about inspirational type of change, but she said that bias to action is what's most important. So I challenge you, take action. What are you going to do as a result of listening to this episode that's going to help you become a more disruptive leader? Let me know. You can put comments in the show notes page. You can send me comments on social media posts that I have for this podcast episode. You can leave me a voicemail on my website using that little black tab on the right of every page, whether you're looking at it from your computer or from a mobile device. And I look forward to hearing from you. So thanks for listening. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. And this has been another episode of the TalentGrow Show. Thank you. And until the next time, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the TalentGrow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.